the time of year people are actually feeling so stressed and pressured, and it's kind of like the straw that breaks the camel's back with the holidays. So often I think that people make that decision either now or the two highest times of the year really for this kind of work is the new year, because people are trying to get through the holidays, especially with kids, and then also the first day of school. So the first day
The
of school
first day
after
of
winter break,
school.
if they have kids, yep, the first day of school after winter break and the first day of school in the fall, because they're
Wow,
trying to
I've
get
never
through
heard
breaks
that.
with kids. Yeah, yeah. So that's when attorneys and mediators and, just depending on how people are going with it. A lot of times it's attorneys because people are seeking information, right?
Hmm.
And,
Hmm.
and, and, um, and a lot of time, I mean, people who work with me, they've talked to an attorney, and I encourage everybody to talk to an attorney, get information, you know, um, there could be some strategy in that as well that can happen if it's divorce coaching that I'm working with people on instead of mediation. But
Hmm.
just, get informed. And
Yeah.
the people who work with me, generally, they want to run away from the attorneys. They want to kind of stay out of the courts if possible. Some people that's possible for. Hey,
Hmm.
Natalie, we have,
Hi there.
hey, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to just sit in on this just for my own benefit. So yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
glad you're here. See that you're a new person here, it looks like. So not sure if you know. Um, Zara, would you like to give her the little spin around how to use the app?
Yeah. Well, she's familiar. I've had her in a few sessions. So
Oh,
yeah,
good.
this is the great Nally. She's just so wonderful. So I'm glad she's in. And tonight you are. Hey Jeff, welcome in. Um, and today we're going to kind of go a little bit more conversational with this, just so that you and Jeff knows, Nally. So feel free to throw your questions out there or just engage in the conversation in regards to this. But I would love, if it's okay with you, Mikki, I would love for the two of you to kind of just be able to reasonably share why this topic for you. Like what interests you about this particular masterclass? You don't have to go into too many, gory details, but just to kind of give us a little bit why this topic jumps out for you.
Yeah, sorry, I just decided to just jump in, and Jeff's here in the room as well too. But
Mhm.
yeah, I'm here because my partner is going through a divorce, and I actually have to initiate a divorce with my ex, and I have avoidance issues, and so that's the reason why I've been waiting on this. Um, but I just wanted to hear, I just wanted my mind to be
Perspective.
on the subject, yeah, and to get
Hmm.
perspective, and just to kind of dip my toe in the water and hear about it. And my partner's divorce, he tried to do mediation. His ex did not want to do mediation, and so it's gotten a little crazy. I mean, not like on the spectrum of crazy. I guess it would probably be right in the middle. But I just wanted to hear what other people's resources and experiences were as well too, so I could kind of big picture the whole situation.
Hmm. Hmm. All right, sounds good. Sounds good. Cool. Jeff, you care to share it all, or
Yeah, there's going to be some background noise. I'm trying to give the three kids a bath right now. So
okay?
um, I sort of vacillate between having days where I'm like, this is a fresh start. We definitely weren't good together. I'm excited to get back out there. And then I have days where I'm like, this is a living nightmare. I can't believe this is happening to me. Uh, Day by day, take it day by day, and just feeling awful. My situation thumbnail is, one second. My situation, yep. Okay, let's go. My
Hmm.
situation thumbnail is that my wife asked for a divorce in August, and
Mm,
I did the begging and the pleading and you're destroying our family. We had three kids together, and how can you do this? And blah, blah, blah. And a couple times out of guilt, she relented, and then I'd get my hopes up. And then the next day she'd just be like, I just said that out of guilt. I want the divorce. And it was this series of being crushed over and over again, having hope, crushed again, et cetera, et cetera. Pretty brutal. She just officially filed for divorce last week, so it's definitely happening. And now we're in this bizarre, like, let's sit down and talk about, how we're going to split up the financials and scenario plan about if you could have enough money to buy me out of the house. And I'm looking at an apartment tomorrow, and it's like this bizarre, cold, business-like transaction between us. And, the marriage was rocky over the past several years. I had some substance use issues, primarily with marijuana, and I would basically took my family for granted and didn't spend the quality time I should have, and was often down in the basement at night smoking. Like, that was the way I would wind down and relax. And I, torture myself all the time, wishing I could go back 2-3 years ago and slap some sense into myself and say, this is going to lead you down a path of divorce, but it's kind of like death by 1,000 cuts. It just like water drops over time, and it eventually has culminated in my wife leaving the marriage. And we've each gotten our own lawyers. That said, I'm hoping it's going to be as amicable as possible, and that the lawyers will essentially just be there to submit whatever we agree to the courts and make sure we're, checking all the boxes and doing it legally and all that. We just bought a house in March, moved the whole family down to Massachusetts. We're now looking at listing the house barely 9 months later. My parents gave me a substantial gift for the down payment. And so I was entertaining the idea of like making the claim that, well, that was a gift to me and I have the gift letter. And so when we sell the house, that shouldn't be eligible for a marital asset and that should go back to my parents. And then I thought to myself, everyone's told me that would have to go in front of a judge. And so that would be insanely expensive to get all the way to get in front of a judge. And B, at the end of the day, the split assets are for the benefit of my 3 kids. Like, it's not like she's taking the money and buying expensive cars. It would be for quality of life for my children. So I just actually today emailed the lawyers and I was like, all right, I'm going to take the gift discussion off the table. Let's just split everything down the middle, 50-50, and call it a day. It's in the best interest of everyone. It's easier. And she was grateful for that. So I've taken a step back from that, and now we're talking about co-parenting schedules. And, I work from home 2 days a week, so I could potentially take them 3 nights a week and she could have them 4. And we're looking to move half an hour, so we're closer to my brother and his little kids. But it's this, we're still living together at the family home. She is all over the dating apps. Like, in fact, tonight I'm literally, it's a nightmare. I'm sitting here. Sorry.
No, you're okay. You're okay. I always say in these rooms, in our, even in the Circles family, we don't have to apologize for what we're, what we're feeling in the moments or whatever. So this is the space for it, honestly. So
So I'm sitting here tonight watching the kids in the family home, giving them a bath, ordering pizza, whatever, while she's out on a date.
Okay.
And we're still living together, and it's not fair, honestly, because I don't like to say, women are like this and men are like that, but I'm pretty sure this is true. And, I'd love to get a woman's perspective on this. But when I go on dating apps and say that I'm still living with my spouse and we just started the divorce process, pretty much every female is like, no, that doesn't work for me. I'm looking for a relationship. And if you're living with your wife, like, clearly you're not ready to be dating. When she goes on the dating apps, guys are like, cool, sounds like a casual hookup. Like, I'm totally into it. And so my sort of perspective is that, men just kind of, physical attraction is top of the list, and they don't really care that what stage she's in, because they just look at it as like a casual hookup opportunity. So,
Mm.
I'm sort of like in a situation where I'm more blocked from getting out there, and she's out there just having casual encounters, and that's really fucked up. And excuse my language, but it's hard to deal with, and it's it's like nightmare scenario. And I've told her, just, I don't want to know any details. Don't tell me what you're doing, who you're going with, where you're going. Like, I just don't even want to know.
That's understandable. Yeah.
And then, the last thing is, I found out she cheated on me earlier this year. It wasn't a long, involved, emotionally attached affair. It was a couple times with this. I mean, it's a long story, but I started to volunteer and teach English to asylum seekers. There's a huge population of them in Maine. And one of them was living in a hotel and basically got kicked out of the hotel in the middle of the winter. So we offered him to come live with us. And that's what she cheated on me with. And I found out, so the whole situation is totally bizarre. Last thing I'll say here, and then I'm done, is that, getting on the dating apps, I have no clue whether I'm actually going to meet up with someone or not, but man, is there just a never-ending list of people who are on there divorced with kids. So it makes me feel less alone. It makes me feel like when I'm ready, there's people out there, and it makes me feel like, it's a more common thing, and there's tons of people out there who are divorced with kids who are looking to find love again. So that gives me some comfort. But right now, man, it's like Twilight Zone, bizarre situation, totally surreal. Can't believe it's happening. And we'll see where I'm at in a year, but it's really, really hard right now.
Yeah, I understand that. And hopefully something in this session today will just be a help that can kind of support you with where you are in regards to it. We want to welcome in Susan, and is it Sabira? Am I saying it right? Hopefully I'm saying it correctly. But welcome in. You just come into masterclass session with myself and Mikki McGill. She's going to lay it out for us and just kind of guide us in this conversation and masterclass session. And we'll see where we go from there. All right, go ahead, Mikki. However you want to flow.
Yeah. So my name is Mikki McGill. I'm a family mediator and divorce coach. And I thought this is the third in a series of master classes. The first one was on your options in divorce, and that was our first one. And then last week was the professionals you may need in your divorce. So today we're talking about deciding to divorce. And, I appreciate some of the sharing that's happened here about kind of where you are. Obviously, it only takes one person to decide to divorce. In fact, no fault divorces in all of the states. Sometimes there's also a piece that can be fault. But there's... It's, it's not always a decision that you've made. So let me affirm that for those that are here, that some of you are getting divorced and it was not your idea, was not your decision. And, you're here today. That said, there are also others here who have made the decision or are in the process of maybe making that decision. And so I thought maybe start out with asking who, and I think there's been a little bit of sharing. I think I got, Jeff, from you that you are still living with your spouse. Sounds like that may be changing very soon. But who else is currently, and I heard, Nally, you're not living with your spouse. Anybody else here care to share, whether you're currently living with your spouse? Just to get an idea where we're at here. You can do that by putting a heart up or in the chat, or if you want to share, you're welcome to do that as well, Jeff. Yeah, you're currently living with. Okay, thank you, Jeff. And welcome, Dan. Glad to have you here. So, not everybody goes through a separation either. So let me just dispel that a little bit. It can somewhat depend upon your state. Some states require that you be separated for a period of time before you file for divorce. So in those states, you're most likely going to go through a separation. Many people do separate. Some people don't separate until they divorce, or do some modified plan, whether it's nesting with the children or something along those routes. But going back to deciding to divorce, I just wanted to say that deciding to divorce is an indecision cycle. It's a cycle of just, it's a cycle that kind of circulates round and round, and it kind of gets more intense as you continue to kind of circle around this cycle. And so I'd like to kind of open it up for a moment for anybody who'd like to share about when, and some people that are, when did you first, if you've been one to consider divorce, when was the first time that you recall considering for divorce? Who would be willing to share a little bit about that? Okay, Susan, you're not living with your spouse. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. Would anybody be willing to share about when, if you're the person who's possibly making this decision or has made this decision, or decided to move on, what showed up? What was the first time that really got your attention and made you think, well, maybe we should divorce? Yeah, so thank you, Czar. So share as you're comfortable. I believe you said, Czar, that these are posted to Spotify. Is that correct?
Yes. So the master classes are recorded, audio recorded, and then they're shared to Spotify. So, when you all are sharing, if it's something you don't want out there like that, be careful with names and, and just too much detail that you don't want out, but please feel free to share. And then if it's something that you want us to know and we can see in the chat, that's also, that's not recorded or anything like that. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then also, and so the picture, if you've decided to put a picture on your little button here, that won't show up on Spotify. Is that correct, sir?
Yeah,
all
only
of
the
that.
audio.
So,
only the audio.
So don't use names. Don't give private information like that. Thank you. Susan, I see your hand up. Go right ahead when you're ready.
Hi, Mikki and Czar. Yeah, I'll share because I have some experience here. I am divorced and I've been divorced for a long time, so I'm here more for an education. As I came on this app the end of June, it was very helpful to me with ruminating and such because I had prioritized my children and the raising of them before my own healing. As quick as the healing went, but maybe it was just timing too. I wish I had done that first, in retrospect. But now I'm here more to share and help others. But it still is beneficial, obviously, if I'm here. But I am divorced. The first time I thought of divorce was our very first Christmas. So we married in June, and by December, I moved out. Lots of fighting, but that was also throughout courtship and engagement. That particular day, he threw a glass of cranberry juice across the house at me and it smashed behind me on the wall. And then it was my job to pick that up. And I went home to live with my mother. My father had previously died. I stayed there until spring. And then we had my mother's cousin coming to do a mission at the church. She's a nun. So I knew that if I stayed, it was going to get out to the whole family, which is way too much consideration of, what other people would think and how we hide it. Unfortunately, that seems to be part of an abuse cycle. I wish it wasn't, because I should have stayed home. It wasn't the right timing to go back. I knew it wasn't the right timing to go back. I knew nothing had changed and nothing was resolved. But I
Okay.
went back.
Hmm.
I then proceeded to have two kids, and years later, really labored, like you said, over that it's cyclical also to make a decision to leave. And I labored over that after infidelity on his part for 3 years. And then in a blow up, I told him to calm down. Not the first time. Again, cycles. Or I was going to call the police. And I called the police for the last time and had him escorted out of here and never went back. So yeah, that's my story. I sort of forget your original question, but I think it was that we labor over it. It's cyclical, and yes, mine was, and the first time was 6 months in.
Thank you for sharing, Susan. And you absolutely answered the question. It was about the first time that you thought of divorce. And I appreciate you sharing, about how, in your circumstance, the volatility in your relationship was during your courtship, during your engagement, and it didn't change in your marriage. It was a cycle that continued on until it sounds like, it wasn't resolved. So until you kind of got off that merry-go-round of that cycle. And
Yeah.
and it sounds like you had two separations. The first separation, you went to your mother's. It was during your first Christmas, and you ended up moving back in the spring. And then life went on. Life went on. You had two kids, and it took you 3 years after your infidelity to finally, and a big blow up. It took a big blow up when the police were called to come to a conclusion of moving forward with divorce.
Yes, and there were many blow-ups and multiple calls to police, and that also was the span of the entire relationship, not just marriage. And every time they were called, they would encourage me to leave and also to press charges, which I never did, which also became that was a mistake, because then when we were parting, I had no records to go pull that any of that existed. So in retrospect, I would have been more honest about the whole thing and stopped hiding it. But I think it's kind of typical in abuse situations.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, Susan, that you went through that. It's difficult for people also. So often I've heard people share just the shame that this is happening,
Hmm.
which is the hiding, but it also, and it becomes a cycle then that way too, that you have to hide it. But the guilt that, you're allowing this. And that's a hard burden to bury and to try to move past, I know, for a lot of people. So thank you for sharing your story. And how, I just want to share too, how encouraging, Susan, thank you for coming on here and just being the encouragement and for other people to hear the other side of that. Because there may very well be someone else in this room that resonates with that story and
Yeah.
right now in their life, right? And
Absolutely.
needs to hear that hope, needs to know that, because, you lose hope in those situations, right? You lose hope and you
Yeah.
feel like, hey, this is never going to change. And there were things that didn't change. This was a cycle, right? But people feel like they can't get out of that cycle, that there's no escape. Yeah, so thank you so much for sharing your story, Susan. I'm sure that's been an encouragement to many people here. So,
Sure.
Natalie, I see Natalie, I see your hand up. Go right ahead when you're ready.
Oh, I just wanted to say the same thing to Susan. I really appreciate hearing your story. I mean, clearly, you've done some work on this because you said, like, I think it really struck me that you said that you can, that other people's opinions had a lot more power and consideration than you would have liked in that situation. And I think that is really true, especially of women. Like, especially for women, we're considering the family, you're considering the culture, you're considering your community, you're considering how it looks for your kids. And like, there's just so much to consider and like your finances, and it just goes on and on. And I feel like, especially for women, that's a huge thing. So, and like the cycle of abuse keep going back, and I think that's also a huge thing for women. And I remember experiencing a lot of shame, going back to different abusive situations because I didn't have a sense of what wasn't abusive. I didn't have a sense of like what was better. So, so it was like, well, that was bad, but now this feels really bad too. So I guess I'll go back to the old bad because that old bad feels more familiar than this new bad, So I just, I appreciated hearing your experience.
Yeah. Since we're on the topic of abuse, and I'm not a specialist in that area at all, but one of the so often people don't recognize that they are being abused, and it's something that becomes as an education because it's a normal, and wondering what is normal. Maybe this is normal. Maybe I'm not doing the thing that I should be. Maybe it's my fault, right? And maybe the other person is actually blaming you to encourage you to kind of go that way with it. And so, education, awareness, getting some perspective on whether what is happening is normal or not. And some people, instinctively know too. There's an instinct inside that they know something's not right. And, but is it my fault? is it the marriage? They hang on, and for a variety of reasons, as you've said, Nally. Whether it's for kids, for family, for your finances, for your whole support system. You're not ready to go through the turmoil. Not that anybody is, but maybe you just don't feel like you're ready for that, right? So it takes a lot of courage, whether it's been an abuse situation or not, and maybe more so with abuse. It takes a lot of courage to make a decision to stand up and do something different. And it's still hard when you're not the person making that decision. I'm not trying to ignore that person or say that, but Dan, I see your hand up. Go right ahead when you're ready.
Is that for Dan?
Yeah, that's for you.
Yeah, Dan.
Yeah, it's good to hear the stories. The first thing that I heard you say is about when you first decided to divorce or make the decision to divorce. And I think for us, it was in 2015. We talked about it and considered it and stuff like that. We didn't follow through with it, but it's like we're pretty much living like roommates now in our house, where she lives on one side of the house and I'm on the other side of the house. And we don't see each other very much. She works 7 days a week, and there's an 8-year age difference in our marriage. And we have 2 kids, 129 and 125, so they're both grown up. And I think for the last 8 years, we probably did that for them to pretty much keep the family together. And I forget where I was going with this. I've been getting a lot of anxiety and not so much depression, but it's been affecting me a lot. And at my job, in my relationship, she'll constantly like try to badger me and stuff like that. And I don't feed into I don't let my emotions control me. When she always wants to like yell and argue, and I just don't. I'm not doing that. That's not where I'm at. Like that'll give me anxiety and stuff like that. Like I'll tell her, let's communicate on a normal voice level. And Thanksgiving, everything was going great. My wife was here, my son was here, my daughter was here. And then within like a split second, my son and my wife, they always get into an argument. And he lives in New Jersey, and he just got up and packed his stuff and left. And they haven't talked with each other since then. And I have communicated with him. And that's very hard on a relationship like that, you know.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to, you know, speak. And I actually joined circles because of my employment, where I'm getting harassed at, and I was going on some of the groups for that, and I just happened to see this one, and I'm kind of seeing how I started to stand up to my boss, and things change when I do that. He doesn't act. He's very harassing. I have like a hearing problem, and I don't believe that he understands that hearing is like a disability. He keeps like mocking me and stuff like that. My wife will do that. She'll mock me all the time. And you know, when people do that to you over time, it starts to mentally break you down, you know. But I just wanted to share and say thank you to the group for letting me sit on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here, Dan. Thank you for sharing, you know, about, you know, how, gosh, well over 10 years ago, you know, you and your wife sat down, had a conversation about it, and, you know, you're kind of coexisting in the same house. You know, marriage is there. You're both doing your own thing. The kids are out of the house. You successfully launched them. And it's kind of roommates now, but, you are having, you do experience some anxiety with her badgering in the home. So you try to manage that as well as you can. And and you've had some harassment at work too. So it sounds like you're working on maybe some boundaries and standing up for yourself some, and you see at work when that happens, when you stand up, it changes the dynamic at work. And it sounds like it makes it better at work when you do that with your boss.
It does. It makes it,
Yeah.
it makes my self-esteem feel better. He backs down when I do that. And it's almost to the point now where I have to document everything that happens, because if they would try to fire me because of whatever, they just got sued for not paying back overtime wages to employees in the excess of like $24 million. And ever since this happened, they like started really coming down on the employees, which is really, they shouldn't be. They're not allowed to do that legally anyway. You know what I mean? But it happens. So,
This
like
kind
you
of
said, I'm trying to manage it, and when I've recognized it now, and it makes it so much better that I can recognize it and educate myself on it. I've been educating myself on different things, like gaslighting is a big one. They're like using some weird techniques that they try to harass me with, like make me think that like what I know that I'm supposed to be doing is not what you're supposed to do. You know, it's weird.
Thank you for sharing that. And, you know, that kind of goes back to the documenting thing and how documentation, I'm not saying you need to document everything, but, you know, Susan shared earlier that in her situation of abuse, she wishes that she had documented things, that there was records, because it would have been helpful later on, and there was no record track there. And it's a little bit different of a situation, right? But even so, there are times to document things. There. So thanks for bringing that up. So this is a little bit different of an adaptation of it, but this marital indecision cycle, we're kind of talking about the indecision cycle that people go through. And sometimes it's kind of together, as Dan's kind of shared, where he and his wife sat down in 2015 and talked about maybe parting ways for the future. Sometimes it's, you know, one party this little red flag going up every so often, and a lot of times it happens, after a blow up kind of breaks the camel's back, so to speak. And this is a really tough time of year in that there's a lot of family expectations and strains going on. A lot of things going on with the holidays, whether it was Thanksgiving or Christmas coming up. So that really this puts a lot of pressure on relationships, whether they're near or far, and can stress those relationships that maybe are already stressed. I know in this field of divorce, we see the biggest cycles, the biggest rise at the first day of school, whether that's of the school year, because after we're getting off a winter break, if people have kids, the first day of school is when people are reaching out and are wanting to talk with attorneys and mediators and coaches and all of this, trying to find their way, trying to get information to move forward. They've probably been Googling in the background, maybe, each time it comes up in the months, but they're actually reaching out to someone to have a conversation here, that first day of school or that first week. It also happens in the fall after people have gotten off of summer break, that people start kind of reaching out.
Yeah.
Zara,
That's always so
anything?
interesting. I was going to say, I was just, every time, me and you talked about that earlier, but it's just like, I'm still in my mind. I had never heard that before, and that's just really interesting. Just an interesting, that there's actually a time when this seems to peak, and I think that we should take that into consideration as well. Because is there any, is there anything that goes into why it's that way?
Well, I do see Susan with her hand up. I'd like to let her have an opportunity
Sure.
first, and then we can explore that further. Absolutely. And maybe she has some opinions on that too. Are you good with that, Zara?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Susan, when you're ready, go ahead.
I don't have the why behind it, but that's an incredible coincidence when you say that, because my youngest was 3 days into her kindergarten year when this happened. And he moved out, and we had a dissolution, and that was final in January. So it was a pretty fast moving thing in that moment, but not fast moving in how it all came about. We moved
Right.
across the state to get away from those previous relationships, because if we were going to have the chance to survive, I knew we needed to pull away from all of that. I also knew that if we didn't make it, I wanted my children to be surrounded by quality Christian marriages to be modeled to them. So we moved across the state to where my family is. You talked about the reasons we labor on coming to that decision and just cycle around and around and around. And Nally touched it too. Some of my reasons were the children, whatever goals I had, whether that be marriage for life or an intact family, traditional family, to be a stay-at-home mom, to have a 50th wedding anniversary. All of those dreams and goals had to be reckoned with and cut ties with and come to terms with doing life a different way. I was a stay-at-home mom, so the finances were absolutely a concern. And somehow I really thought I could not do that. But of course I did. I was a single mom, held on to my house, went off and got a master's degree because my bachelor's would not work in the new place that I moved. So I guess I'm also speaking to the hope that you talked about too. There is hope. I got a 4.0 in my master's program, and I'm an educator. And I have provided for my family and held on to my house by the grace of God. God was another reason, because when I married, to me, this was a covenant with God. So everybody was telling me to leave, including the church. And I knew I had to stand before him by myself. None of these other people were going to stand there alongside of me. And I needed to be good with that decision and know that um, I stayed for my kids and I stayed for God, and I left for my kids and I left for God. But I had to get there. It was not a godly relationship. So it wasn't how God intended me or my daughters to live, and I was showing my daughters everything wrong. And so if I have to struggle as a single person, rewrite the story so that my daughters don't choose this way, then hallelujah, I'm up for it. And what a noble calling. So I have just sunk myself into motherhood and adored it. It has been life in general, not just motherhood. I have had so much joy. So for anybody who thinks there isn't hope or that you won't make it, you absolutely will. Yeah, there's a movie, Waiting to Exhale. The exhale is so lovely. It's so lovely. Yeah, we rise from the ashes, but it is hard to walk through for sure.
Thanks, Susan.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. And appreciate the work that you continue to do as you shared at the beginning, Susan, about how you were really embroiled with putting your daughters above everything else, right? And how you're working through that as well as being the best mom that you can be, and being a model, a good model for them, and living your faith, because that's a big part of what's brought you through this, and been a big piece of your story as you've walked this journey. Yeah. One of the things too, and this kind of goes back to the why now that I think you asked, Czar, is really a lot of this is grief and loss.
Absolutely.
And Susan, you were talking about, I appreciate how clear that you named a number of things, like that 50th wedding anniversary you wanted to have. I mean, the 50th you named, there are these, we spend so much time so often, particularly if you're the bride, planning that wedding, and we have all of these hopes and dreams together. That's not just one-sided. Have all of these hopes and dreams together, and so much is invested in that. and then there's a lot of loss there. And our lives are built together, and then we add children to it, and we have these amazing life experiences that we've shared with this person, that we're now tied and tethered to this person with in parenthood, that it's really, there's a lot of losses and a lot of griefs that happen along that journey. And the person who decides to divorce traditionally has done more grieving than the person who is the receiver, so to speak. So I would submit that that's a lot of the, and there's so many hopes around the holidays. There's so many hopes around, summer break. And there's children that people consider. That's a lot of the reason people do it at that time. If people have adult children, it's not so much tied to the fall, the first days of school, right? But there are definitely people too who, as they look at 2024, say, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. And they look at a new year as a fresh start and are trying to figure out how to navigate life next.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
So grief and loss. What are some of the things that you all? I appreciate what Susan's mentioned. Some of the things. What are some of the things that you all have been grieving as you've gone through the marital indecision cycle, and or for where you are? what are some of those things that you are grieving? Who'd be willing to share?
I'll mention like when I was divorced years and years ago, and
Mm-hmm.
then became a single father. And one of the things that I grieved was that, and then having my children actually have to have parents in two separate homes.
Yeah.
And then eventually two separate states, because I ended up leaving the state, and it was a grievance for me, even for just, because I know that when there's divorces and things like that, that the children are affected. And that weighed on me quite heavy, because even having my children, I remember going into my own sense of depression, because I was bringing the kids into this world, so it was like, oh my goodness, what are we bringing them into? So then to have to raise them the way that we did, and mom at the time wasn't as active. Like she was in communication with them, but not necessarily as active, and then so, and that was just a huge, I remember grieving that. So that's just one thing that came up for me as you asked that question. So hope others have some things that may be there too.
Thank you for sharing that, Czar. Yeah, and I think sometimes there's also an additional grief for people who have been, they were their parents divorced, and they really didn't want to repeat that, or they swore that they, weren't going to repeat it or do it the same way, and the fears that come up with that, and not wanting to do that to your children. It's just really very traumatic to people. Jeff, I see your hand up. You want to go ahead when you're ready?
Jeff, you might be muted, Jeff. I don't know.
I apologize, guys. I missed the tap on that. I missed I just torture myself with thinking about years past and being happy and carefree, and my only stresses were minor work related, and hiking with my kids as they were growing up, and now every day is like traumatic, and I'm it's hard to eat, sleep, function at work, and it's just such a emotional and mental slog. And I just wish I could go back in time to when times were lighter, and we were having holidays together and eating dinner as a family and cutting down the Christmas tree. And so I just sort of grieved my past life, and I'm 41, so I have a lot of life left to live and memories to create, but it's hard to focus on that, and I just find myself reliving the past and wishing I could go back.
Thank you for sharing that, Jeff. It's hard not to look back and remember the good times and yearn for that, because sometimes we see the beauty, so much stronger looking in the rearview mirror, or realize what we are missing, And one of the things I know in talking with families, particularly of young children, and everybody that divorces doesn't have young children, but one of the things that I hear so often is just being able to put them to bed. And I've worked with families where, it's just a heartbreak, right? That, like, for example, the dad, I'm not going to be there to put my kids to bed every night. Because I have a lot of dads who are really hands-on and really just totally in love with their kids, right? And so, on those nights that they don't have the kids, a lot of times we've arranged where, there's going to be a call, it could be FaceTime or whatever, to say goodnight, to daddy, and say goodnight to the kids, and keep that connection, right? So missing the things with the kids, or missing being able to provide them that intact family. And it's hard. It's harder, other than hopefully less conflict, right? But not always. In some ways, it's harder to cope. It's harder to single parent than it is, if you can do it together in the home. It's just not possible for everybody, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll mention this too while you said it, because like Jeff was talking about just missing the past life or thinking
Mhm.
about in the past, and the fact that you brought this up about being grief. One of the things that we talk about, and I'm a grief recovery method specialist, and one of the things
Mhm.
that we speak
Yeah.
about even with the grief is, Jeff, and just something you can think about, what is it that I wish was different, better, or more of? What do I wish was different, better? We talked about the pieces of the hopes, dreams, and expectations that we had, but also there's a piece of what do I wish was different, better, or more? Right. And as you process some of those things, it's sort of at times, once you get that out, it helps you to kind of launch or move forward. It doesn't take it all away, but it helps you
Mhm.
move forward in that sense, because you allow the emotional processing of that to actually come through,
Mhm.
to where you can kind of say bye for that. I don't speak much about what we usually say, closure. It's more so getting complete, getting emotionally complete, so that it's not just lingering in that way. So it's just something to kind of take into consideration, you all, if you find yourself in a situation like what Jeff is speaking about.
Thank you, Zara. And I love that. What do I wish was different? What do I wish was better? Or what do I wish I had more of?
Mm-hmm.
And really, defining that, naming that, actually puts you in action, and moves you out of being paralyzed to everything's wrong, or I feel, depressed, or sad or angry or whatever it might be, right? It actually moves you to identify what it is, so that then you can take a next step toward, hey, I wish I had a better relationship with my kids. Maybe I can call them,
Absolutely.
or maybe I can text them, or maybe, maybe next time we're together, I'll see what kind of an activity they're interested in, and then we'll arrange it, and have a date together, right? So it kind of helps to move you from that paralysis and that just darkness. I don't know. Darkness. It's a type of darkness, right? That
Yeah.
discouragement.
Yeah.
Um,
And
of
ruminations.
rumination. Absolutely. It can move you out of rumination, because rumination is such a cycle that will just spin you faster than a washer or a dryer. It just spins, and it just goes faster and faster, and it just wears you down emotionally, mentally. You all know that.
Yeah.
And our emotions, our passions, those are a strength within us that are to be used. And when it gets spun out and worn out on rumination and on looking back or regret, it doesn't use the power that they really have to make change and to make, things different, to make things better, or to make, more of what it is that, that's missing at this point. So I
Absolutely.
know we're just about at the end. Have we missed anything in the chat? I haven't followed it as well as I should.
No, there wasn't much
Here,
going on.
don't ignore
Nothing much
anything.
going on. Yeah, nothing much going on in the chat that we needed to openly bring out. Just a few people addressing each other, But yeah, we have come to the close. Anybody have any final thoughts or comments before we close the class today? Any thoughts or special takeaways that anybody have? You don't have to, but if you have one, we'd love to hear it. Give a couple seconds for somebody to maybe throw their hand up in regard to that, or you can put it in the chat if you'd like to. But in the meantime, Mikki, wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much for this. I
Thank
think
you,
this is a
Gar.
conversation.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Oh, now we're doing like we do
Well,
on Zoom. Wait, no, me, you.
we're supposed to be getting better at this, right? Yeah, I
Right.
just want to do a shout out to everybody really who is going through the oh gosh, my word isn't even coming to me right now, but really the anguish that really goes through that people go through, and that cycle to make a decision, and all of the process there. So really, just compassion and empathy to you guys. It's not easy. And just want to affirm that, you are in pain, and just encourage you to explore what that is. And, and maybe start by asking, what you wish were different, better, and more, like Czar, has recommended as a grief recovery specialist as a place to start, because you are grieving. And actually, when you're going through divorce, your whole family and maybe your extended connections will also be grieving. They'll be at different places at times, so you won't meet in the same time zone on it. But be kind to yourself and give yourself the time and process and resources that you need to get there, because there is a process for you to get there, to wherever it is you're getting and going, getting clear about what it is that you need to do and where you need to be. So thanks for having me here today, Czar.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mikki, so much. For those of you that would like, let's show Mikki some love and appreciation for her time with us and just for her information and sharing and facilitating this for us. We really appreciate it. Now, listen, I hope you all, I see that in the chat, Dan said it's always good to be able to share on a group level. Absolutely. And Susan says, thank you. Absolutely. Absolutely. There's power in these kind of groups and being able to be in these sessions. It really helps us. Believe it or not, it's a sense of empowerment that you're tapping into that helps you navigate these difficult times. All right. So again, I hope this was helpful. If you guys don't mind, please leave a review once this group closes and that little thing pops up. Leave a review. Let us know how we're doing, and even maybe some other topics and things that you guys would like to see in masterclass. Put that in there, and Circles takes note of it, and we try to bring you what you need. All right. Go ahead, Mikki.
Hey, just as a quick last thing, Czar, what's coming up in the next masterclass?
I think the next masterclass is self-forgiveness with Dr. Tracy. That's next week.
That sounds like a good one.
Yeah.
I may
Yes.
even be there for that.
Yeah, it's self-forgiveness, and I think it's a 2-part. So the next 2 Fridays will be self-forgiveness with Dr. Tracy. I can't remember the tagline to it, but it is about self-forgiveness. So
Awesome.
you all don't want to miss
Thanks.
that. All right,
No.
folks. All right, you all enjoy the rest of your Friday, and until next time, peace.
Peace. Bye-bye.